Number 10. Cab driver femicide. Former cab driver Ricardo Alexis Diaz was recently sentenced to 50 years in prison for one of the most brutal incidents of taxis gone wrong. This sick taxi driver is responsible for murdering a young student in Mexico. Mara Fernanda Castilla Miranda went missing in September of 2017 after taking a cab to the outskirts of Puebla, near Mexico City. According to the investigators, Ricardo, who was only 24 years old at the time, kidnapped Mara instead of bringing her to her destination. He took the girl against her will to a hotel, where he then strangled her to death. After the brutal murder, he dumped her body in a ditch, where it was found several days later. It's unclear what the motive behind the killing was. Ricardo had been a taxi driver for a while and could have killed any number of people, but he just seems to have snapped when Mara got into his cab. The dead girl's mother told local news that she was satisfied with the sentence of 50 years, though she would have preferred 60 years. She also said that although Ricardo is being punished by the authorities, a divine punishment will come from him in time. Number 9. An opportunistic murder. After a couple forgot their keys in a cab, their worst nightmare came to life. It was a Saturday morning in Brazil when Marcelo Sala was contacted to give the couple a ride to Florencio Varela. It was a 7-hour drive, which passed completely normal without any incident. However, the couple asked that the driver wait for them outside. When the couple got out of the car, Marcelo noticed that they had left their keys and a fanny pack in the back seat. He decided it was a great opportunity to take their keys, drive back to their house, and rob them blind. So, Marcelo did just that. He took off without them, drove back to their house, and then used the keys to get inside. Marcelo thought nobody would be home. However, the daughter of his passengers was in the house. At just 23 years old, Eileen Estefanda Arredondo got into a fight with the old man when he used her parents' keys to get inside. The fight turned violent, with Marcelo beating the poor girl until she was completely disfigured. According to official sources, he beat her so badly that she died right there on the floor of her very own house. And here's where things got really dramatic. As Marcelo tried to leave, the neighbors caught him and made a civilian arrest. They held him until the police arrived, at which point the police took him away. We don't know what's become of Marcelo, the murderer, but he's almost certainly never going to see the light of day again for what he did. Number 8. North Irish drug smuggler. During the pandemic, a taxi driver from Northern Ireland wanted to make a bit of easy money, so he decided to get into a business of smuggling drugs. He was recently busted, along with his 2 accomplices, in an operation that consisted in smuggling over $500,000 worth of cannabis between the capital of Belfast and Dungannon. Damien Gildernew was the brains behind the operation, busted by police when they stopped his taxi in an underground parking lot and found over 10 kilos of cannabis in the trunk. When the police searched the apartment upstairs, they found another 16 kilos of cannabis in a cupboard in his bedroom. The weed was vacuum sealed in plastic bags, ready for distribution. In total, that's almost 60 pounds of pot. The arrest came following a long investigation in which the police watched surveillance footage outside the apartment where Gildernew was busted. The police saw that he was going to and from the apartment at random times, suggesting he was moving drugs. As it turns out, he was a regular courier hauling weed between one city and another, but he was only getting paid around $200 each journey. The money from the pot didn't actually go to him. He was simply getting paid to move it. It wasn't a very lucrative operation and proved to be significantly more trouble than it was worth. Number 7. Taxi battering ram. In Hong Kong, a taxi was used like a battering ram when it crashed into a pedestrian island, killing 1 and injuring almost 10. The crash was an accident. The taxi driver never actually intended to kill anyone. Instead, he was just old and driving dangerously. According to the local Hong Kong police, the driver was 63 years old at the time and had since been arrested for dangerous driving. The incident occurred on Tai Po Road when he seemingly lost control of his cab and smashed into the pedestrian island where people were waiting to cross the street. After the impact, a pregnant woman was left trapped underneath his ruined taxi. Luckily, some good Samaritans rushed into the street and worked together to lift the taxi off the pregnant woman, saving her from certain death. Among the victims rushed to the hospital was an elderly woman and a 4-year-old boy. Another woman was unconscious and had to be carried to the nearest hospital, while another 3 victims were rushed to the hospital, but not in serious condition. As for the person who died following the brutal crash, they have yet to be identified by the authorities. So far as we know, the person died immediately after getting run over by the rogue taxi. Number 6. Taxi killer. Christopher Hollowell is a maniac murderer who used to drive a cab in York, England. He was actually in jail, serving a life sentence for killing Sean O'Callaghan back in 2011 when he was charged with yet another murder from 2003 of Becky Godden. But the real horror story is that since then, Christopher has confessed to even more mysterious killings that would make him one of the worst serial killers in English history. But to understand the taxi killer a bit better, let's back up to before he was arrested. At 52 years old, Christopher was living with his partner and his 3 daughters. Fellow taxi driver Neil Barnett described Christopher as a really nice guy and a totally normal person. But what his friends, coworkers, and family didn't know was that Christopher had a dark side. He was secretly using prostitutes in his spare time. He was getting rough and weird, with some of them being forced to call for help. His nightly activities came to a grinding halt when he was directly connected to the murder of Sean O'Callaghan. But he has also been linked to the disappearance of a girl named Claudia Lawrence. Even more disturbing is that police found a secret trophy trunk filled with women's clothing, about 60 articles in total. 2 of the items were identified, as one belonging to Sean and the other to Becky Godden. The other 58 are still unknown, suggesting Christopher may have killed upwards of 60 women throughout his entire life. Number 5. Road rage. Taxi driver Adib Ibrahim used his vehicle as a weapon to kill a man named Ralph Bizanet. It was a terrifying case of road rage gone wrong, and the driver has since been sentenced to spend 4 years in prison. How it all started is, quite frankly, a little shocking. The taxi driver had gotten into an unfortunate interaction with Ralph right before the murder. Ralph was riding his longboard when the cab drove a little too close to him. Upset, Ralph yelled at the taxi driver and hit his vehicle with his hand. It wasn't the end of the world, just a light slap against the cab. But the driver became so furious that he swerved his cab into Ralph's path. He lost his temper and tried to run the guy down. During court proceedings, it was found that the driver did indeed use his vehicle as a weapon with the intent of hurting Ralph, not just scaring him. The cab hit the longboarder. He was crushed, his skull cracked like an egg, and he died instantly. Superior Court Justice Robert Clark said the only merciful aspect of the incident is that Ralph had a swift death, though the kid's final moments may have been horrific. Number 4. Crack-dealing taxi driver. A taxi driver has been busted selling crack cocaine to fake passengers. The cabbie drug dealer, named Reese Hearn, was jailed for 3 years. He got caught after an unmarked police car got suspicious of his movements. The officer had witnessed Reese's cab pull up to a bus stop, pick up a lady, drive about 300 yards, then stop and let her out. Thinking it was a bit weird, the officer followed the taxi and pulled him over. Inside the cab, the cop found a stash of about $265 in cash, a phone with messages relating to drug dealing, and 10 pre-packaged bundles of 65% pure crack. There was also a Ziploc bag with 77% pure cocaine. Once Reese knew he was busted, he told officers that he was just trying to make a living. But what a measly living it was. Reese admitted that he only made about $600 in a week, keeping about $200 for himself and giving the rest to a supplier. Number 3. Killed by umbrella. Something terrifying happened in Brooklyn involving a taxi driver and an umbrella. Eyewitnesses told police that a gypsy cab driver by the name of Uro Ama Orji, an immigrant from Nigeria, was savagely attacked by his male passenger and the passenger's female companion as they got out of his cab on Thomas S. Boylan Street. The brutal attack was something straight out of a horror movie. The assailant took his umbrella and jabbed it into the taxi driver's eyeball. His eyes immediately burst open, gushing blood all over the taxi. His foot involuntarily hit the gas. The car sped for about a block, smashed into some parked cars, and the driver slumped over dead. The umbrella hit him so hard in the eye that it pierced his brain and killed him. Fernando Mateo, the head of the New York Federation of Taxi Drivers, said that the method used to kill Mr. Uro was barbaric and unheard of. He said he's seen stabbings and shootings, but never someone getting poked through the eye and into the brain with an umbrella tip. Police have yet to pin down a motive, though they did find the suspect. Shamel Allen, 28 years old, was discovered hiding in the closet of his friend's house by the police. They booked him, threw him in jail, and he has since been charged with manslaughter and a criminal possession of a weapon. He was even picked out of a police lineup, reducing any chance of him getting away with this brutal crime. Number 2. Inappropriate driver. A cab driver in Jordan was recently arrested after he got caught watching inappropriate adult videos inside his cab while parked on the street. This guy was such a pervert that he couldn't even wait until he got home, so he had to indulge while on the job. To make matters worse for this guy, he got busted on video by a passerby who uploaded the gruesome sight to social media. The authorities got a hold of the video, launched an investigation, and quickly tracked the guy down and dealt with him. But just wait, because the story gets even more gross. The arrest of the pervert came just days after 2 separate videos were shared on social media in Jordan of 2 different people, both cab drivers, committing indecent acts while alone and driving their vehicles through the city. The lesson here is to maybe stay out of taxis the next time you take a trip to Jordan, as these guys are clearly up to no good. And number 1, cabin in the woods. A taxi driver in Georgia met a gruesome end when she was murdered. Her name was Rosanna Delgado, and she was last seen on surveillance footage in DeKalb County on April 20th. 4 days after she was reported missing, her remains were found burned in a cabin in the woods. Her body had been cut up and the pieces set on fire. The only reason her body was discovered at all was that the police managed to track her phone signal to the site of the murder. The police immediately realized they were dealing with something terrible, so they went and checked through the local surveillance footage of the day Miss Delgado went missing. They found Miss Delgado shopping in a local store with a woman named Megan Colon, who they arrested on suspicion of murder. They have since arrested 4 more people in connection with the killing, with 3 suspects still at large. They have no idea what prompted the horrible crime, and the police are still pretty tight-lipped about the situation because the investigation is ongoing. What we do know is that most of the suspects will probably be charged in connection to the murder, either as murderers themselves or accomplices. As for the unfortunate victim, she was 37 years old and a mother of 2, just trying to make a living as a driver for Lyft. It's not like she had any money, so a robbery was probably out of the question. This may have been a simple cold-blooded murder, perpetrated by some real sick people. How do you feel about hopping in a cab after hearing these wild stories? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and come back for another shocking video. See you next time.